All right. So, hello, everyone. This is Jason Nugent. He is a mortgage broker that has been doing this job for a great many years. He's got some good stuff to say today, and I'm going to ask him some nice, challenging questions that will probably be on the top of some of your guys' heads. He's from Dominion Lending, and I will have all of his contact information if anybody wants to give him a call and get qualified to get out there and start looking at houses or anything like that. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much.
So I'm just gonna get right in here. Currently, okay, so we know what's going on with the rates and everything. The Bank of Canada held on January 24th at the rate. But is a variable or a fixed rate mortgage a better choice, and why?
So it's as like anything else, it definitely comes down to consumer comfort. Are you comfortable with the possibility the rates could go up or down? Right now, I'm not 100% convinced that we're at that point where the variable is the right way to jump in. When you compare a 5-year fix versus a 5-year variable, you're probably about 6.3 on a 5-year variable, and 509 on a 5-year fixed. So I mean, you can almost split the difference and go with a 3-year term, maybe about 5.44. We are expecting rates to drop. We're probably looking at June as that, when we'll first start seeing those rates come down. But it's going to be a slow trek down. We're probably looking at, the expectation, the prediction is 1%, a 1% drop in rates in 2024, but that's by the end of 2024. We're expecting 1%. Right. That could get slowed down if we see the economy still continue to keep doing well. The plan is kind of a 2% drop by the end of 2025. So that 6.3 could be 4.3 by the end of 2025. So you could definitely come out ahead, but you're also going to be spending, a 1% premium, one and a bit percent premium for a good amount of time in order to just catch up where that fixed rate is. So it's definitely one of those things that you want to do a deep dive into. The other issue we run into right now a little bit too is, even for the people that want to take a variable, it's harder to qualify at 6.3 than it is to qualify at 5.09. So as much as some people even want to get a variable, they may just not qualify to get that variable. So it's one of those things we really have to chat with, and make sure everybody's comfortable with the situation.
Could you take say like a 1-year fixed and then roll it into a variable if you really wanted to take the chance, thinking that, if the rates go down enough, would it be worthwhile?
It could be. The biggest issue you run into is mortgage interest rates are based off of the bond market. And without getting like crazy into what happens, it's all supply and demand. So everybody literally wants that exact option that you're talking about. So what happens is it pushes up the price. So a 1-year rate is actually in line with a variable rate, or if not a little bit higher. So you're going to end up with a rate that's in the 6s. So you still kind of end up with as much as we used to be able to try to game the system, they figured it out on us. So.
All right. So what should buyers have in place before they come and see a mortgage broker for qualification?
The best things that you can kind of come up with, depending on, what kind of employment you have. If you can have a T4, for the last 2 years, like the 2023 T4 should just be rolling out around now. So if you bring your 2022 or your 2023 T4s, current pay stub, and then have an idea of what your down payment's going to be. So whether it's coming from your savings, your RRSPs, that new home buyers investment account, or a gift from family, if we have a number of what that's going to be, then it makes it a lot easier to figure out what you're going to qualify for.
Okay. And if you're getting a gift of, your down payment or a portion of it, that kind of thing, is it better that, they have the money well in advance, or is it okay to put in an offer and then they know how much they actually need? What's the best policy before close for that?
Sure. So what we'll end up doing is getting a gift letter from the family member that's gifting you the money. And usually what we want to do is we want to see that money in your bank account 10 business days before closing. Ideally, a little bit more than that. Within 30 days of the closing of your house. You definitely don't have to have it before you put the offer or anything else. You just want to know that, that money is coming, and then, and then we can kind of work it out from there.
Excellent. Okay. Now, what would be the biggest reason that people get turned down for a mortgage, even though they can afford a mortgage? They're just, something's popped up.
Sure. There's no biggest reason. There's a few different reasons. Oh, did I freeze?
No.
Am I okay?
Yeah.
Okay. There's no big reason. There's, we run into down payment that can often happen where someone doesn't have enough of a down payment to buy a house, or the down payment's not where they thought it was. So, it was a work, kind of pension plan type thing, but they didn't realize that they weren't actually allowed to use that money because it's vested. Credit problems. So, it could be something as small as you don't pay your cell phone bill, regularly. You pay them every couple of months or something like that. That can impact your credit score. But otherwise, everything is great. You just didn't realize that, not paying, every month is a big deal. But I would say, if to answer your question, what's the biggest problem? I would say it's probably variable income. And what I mean by that is that if you've got hourly employees, and they get a lot of overtime, if that money isn't consistently on their T4s, so you might make, $70,000-$80,000 a year, but your base income is only 55, but consistently you always make, 75, 80. Well, if you've only been at that job for a little while, or if you just got a raise, or something like that, your T4s may not back it up. And if we don't have a 2-year average on that income, then we can't use it for a traditional lender.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So can you explain the stress test and what's the current qualifying rate for that?
Sure. So the stress test came out a few years ago, when interest rates were back in the, kind of 2%, 2.5% range. The government, as well as banks, lenders, the industry knew that rates eventually would go back up. We had kind of hit, the bottom. And so the big fear was that if we give somebody a mortgage at 2%, if they come up for renewal at, 4 or 5%, they may not be able to qualify for that mortgage anymore. So they brought out something called a stress test. And what that did is that, so today's interest rates, I think we talked about, something like 5.09. So as much as you're going to borrow the money from the bank at 5.09, the bank needs to confirm that if interest rates ever went up to 7.09, that you could still make a payment, still make your mortgage payment based on that higher rate. So the stress test is 2% above whatever rate you're borrowing that money. So, when we talked about the variable rate at 6.3, you've actually got to qualify at 8.3, even though the interest rate's going to be that monthly payment, that interest rate's going to be lower. It's just that much harder to qualify, with the stress test.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, we have a lot of, okay, I just about skipped a question here. How do people get things in order to be sure that they do get the best interest rate when they are shopping around?
The best bet is to talk to a mortgage broker before you start shopping. So we can go through, all of your income. We can go through your down payment. We can check your credit. We want to make sure all that stuff is in line. Even if you have no intention of buying for 6 months, if we start, the sooner we start looking, the sooner we can find any issues that might come up. Like I've had situations where, you've got John Smith who has things showing up on their credit bureau from a different John Smith. It's a very common name, so all of a sudden your credit might be impacted. But because we started looking early on, we can call Equifax, we can get that kind of stuff fixed up. So if we check early on and get everything sorted, it puts you in a better position to get those, the best interest rates and, get the best mortgage for you. I mean, the other thing too is you want to talk to a mortgage broker before you start shopping, because if you go out and start looking at houses and you start looking at, $700,000 or $800,000 houses, but you qualify for 5 or 6, you're never going to be able to find a house that meets your expectations because you've been looking for houses that, were $150,000 outside of your budget.
Yes.
So, it helps us manage expectations. So I always say that, realtors get to sell the dream. I have to sell the reality.
No kidding. Sometimes it's a real cold shower. Okay, so with regards to multi-generational families, oftentimes it's becoming increasingly normal for the aging parents to sell their home and combine households with the children, and then first-time home buyers, the young kids that used to think that they could get into something, but now because of what's happened with real estate getting so expensive, them thinking they'll never get into home ownership, now they're all combining households. What are pitfalls to having multiple people go on to the same mortgage? Does it make it more difficult for them to qualify?
Not so much more difficult. Obviously there's going to be a little bit more paperwork involved, just because we've got more people involved. There are some lenders that don't love having, multiple people on a mortgage. So it could, a little bit limit us in terms of which banks, or lenders or credit unions we go to. But generally speaking, most banks are okay with it. The biggest pitfalls are to sit down and really have a serious conversation with your family as you're going through the process, or before you even start the process, that what happens if this doesn't work out. Is, are the other, can the other side afford it, or can the kids afford it? If mom and dad have to, move out to a home, or, something like that, are the kids in a position that they can still carry that mortgage? So that's really, it just comes down to making sure that everybody's on the same page, and, looking at the short-term and long-term, implications of doing it. But to your point, like, it's, with where prices have gone to, it's becoming the norm. Finish the basement suite, put an addition on, in Toronto, we're even seeing, houses being built in, in driveways, laneways, and things like that. So it is the way things are going. It's very common in Europe that, to have multi-generations. So but with prices the way they're going, that's absolutely the newest thing. So.
Yeah, it's making sure they manage their expectations as well, because most of them have already lived with each other way back, and now they're getting back into it, remembering the bad habits. Oh crap.
Well, I remember coming home from college after that, that first summer, and everybody's going, parents going, well, where are you going? What time are you going to be home? It's like, well, what difference does it make? I was just gone for 8 months.
What are you giving me, a curfew again? Okay, so on January 24th, the Bank of Canada held the current interest rate. What's going to be required for the Bank of Canada to actually lower their rates later this year?
Well, things changed again in January. We saw the numbers come out, that the inflation numbers in Canada were still a little bit higher. So there was some optimism we might even see interest rates drop in the spring. It looks like it's been pushed out to probably June. What's it called? The U.S. Came back today, and we saw their employment numbers were actually better than we anticipated, than everybody anticipated down there, which could potentially push it off even further for those rate decreases. really what we need to see happen, to kind of circle back to your question, we need to see the economy start slowing down. We need to see that inflation number continue to drop as opposed to increase. And that's ultimately what it comes down to is, we need to see that. I mean, we're now at that point where I think we're 24 months in from when the rates started increasing from the Bank of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they say it takes about 18 months to feel a rate increase. So the slowdowns that we're starting to see now are the ones, over the last 6 months is the initial ones. So these big jumps that happened, we're now starting to feel the impact of those big increases. So over the next 6 months, we should start really seeing the economy slow down, and that should give the Bank of Canada a reason to start dropping things. The biggest thing they don't want to do is they don't want to start dropping things, and all of a sudden the economy just starts, jumping again, and people start spending. So really, it's just going to be a matter of, pulling up your socks and hanging on a little bit longer, and we should start seeing it happen.
Yeah. Okay. So now if the interest rates do drop and prices of homes go up, where is that break-even point where it costs more per month, even though the rates are actually down?
This one's a tough one to answer because there's no real, it's easy to look back and say, okay, in 2020, this was the point and this is where it made more sense and this is where everybody should have bought, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I ran some quick numbers, but, and if house prices go up even 3%, which, if we get back into multiple offer situations, house going up 3% is nothing when, people start getting in a bidding war. Interest rates have to go down 30 basis points, so 0.3%, just to offset that 3% increase. So, it doesn't take much for those prices, if they start going up, even a half or a 5%, or even 10%, if we get into that frenzy we had, kind of April of last year, interest rates have got to drop a ton. And I mean, if we start seeing interest rates coming down, we will see the market start picking up because there's a lot of pent up demand. So like I was talking to a colleague about this kind of in anticipation of our meeting today. I mean, we both kind of figured out, I mean, this is kind of the sweet spot to be buying a house right now. You don't have necessarily the multiple offers in most cases, but you can still get a home inspection. You can still get a financing clause. And I mean, if you bought a house today with a 3-month closing or 4-month closing, you actually get to buy that house at today's pricing and actually ride the interest rates down a little bit as we head towards June. And because I mean, it's like I said, I think prices will start climbing again, hopefully not to the craziness we had, but realistically, I mean, there's a lot of pent up demand. I'm doing pre-approvals like crazy. People want to buy. So.
Yes, we had with the pandemic, everybody had to stay indoors, and then the interest rates and the inflation rates and all this going on just kind of kept them stuck inside. And so many have wanted to move. Lots have done their changes that they can do to their house, but some just don't feel it's enough and they want to get out there and make that change. So hopefully there'll be lots more inventory for them and they can get in at a decent time before it gets too crazy with pricing again.
Absolutely. So it's just, I think you start getting your ducks in a row. And if you're thinking about moving, everything else, I mean, you guys know better than I do. It's, start painting now, start doing the little touch-ups now, and don't wait till March when everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got the nice mild weather this year, so which is, I think it's been the warmest since I've moved to Ontario in 22 years. So definitely a good time. Well,
absolutely.
I really want to thank you for taking the time to do this with me. I think that you really answered a lot of great questions, and it's probably going to make some people think and understand that things are not doom and gloom and things are good right now. So Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll close off the recording and we'll go from there.
Thank you.